Hey, good morning, all. Today we have Anshuman. Anshuman is senior staff security engineer at Lyft, and today he's going to talk to us about Gen AI adoption as well as the risk coming with the adoption coming in the industry. So, Anshuman, thank you. Thanks for coming and joining us on this talk. If you can briefly tell us about your current role and the experience regarding in this industry.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me, Naveen. I really appreciate it. Uh, yeah, I've been in the information security space for about 15 years now. I've worked at both big enterprises like Atlassian, Intuit, EMC. I've also worked in a few healthcare startups. For the past couple of years or so, I've been the AppSec lead at Lyft, and over the span of my career, I've worn different hats. I've played around with cloud security and infrastructure security. I've also done incident response, um, security operations, but application security continues to be my core expertise, and this is something I'm really passionate about. Um, yeah.
Cool. So, as you see, right, the Gen AI adoption is increasing like tremendously everywhere, every place, impacting like Nvidia growing so big, and whole industry is running towards Gen AI adoption and looking at the good things that it is bringing in. So, do you think this is the next big revolution that has come in the industry, or it is just you are saying it's like a bubble which is gonna burst somehow someday?
No, I really believe that generative AI is here to stay. I use um, ChatGPT and Perplexity and all of these basically chatbots provided by these third-party LLM vendors on a daily basis, and I really believe that it has improved my life. So, as a personal user, like when Bitcoin came about, when like NFTs were a thing, right? I did try playing around with those technologies, but I didn't really believe in them, like because they weren't necessarily providing value to me in my day-to-day life. I don't think that's happening with Gen AI. Gen AI is actually, it could be used in multitude of ways. I see people starting businesses overnight, like even if they don't know how to code, just because AI has made it so much easier. So, yeah, I think it's here to stay, and it's only getting better with newer models that keep coming out. So, yeah, I'm really excited about the future.
Very nice, very nice. Cool. So apart from that, as you see, right, any new trend comes that brings up a because with the data, right, if data is involved and the knowledge involved,
Mhm,
code is involved, that comes always comes with the security threats. So
mhm.
what are the most significant security threats that you think are coming with the Gen AI adoption?
Yeah, so like you said, I think data security is probably the biggest threat I'm seeing these days, right? Because um, if you think about ChatGPT or Perplexity, right, they are basically trained on data that is available on the internet, right? So if you're providing your own sensitive data to these vendors, you there's no transparency or there's no visibility whether they're using your personal data to train their models or not. So I think data privacy is probably the biggest thing that even enterprises are concerned about. I can speak a little bit about Lyft as well, right? Like Lyft is also um, like we are currently exploring how we can leverage AI to sort of improve our features and whatnot, right? Without going into too much details. And as a security team, right, our responsibility is to make sure that we enable these innovators, we enable engineers in Lyft to be able to do these things in a safe and secure way. And data privacy and security often comes up in conversations, and it is really important to sort of uh, take a step back and look at the problem space holistically and figure out how the data is flowing, right, all the way from the source, from the sink to the source. So I want to say, I think apart from data privacy and security, I think there's some transparency issues as well, right? Like, especially with when OpenAI came up with their latest model, the O1 preview, right? I really appreciate how it sort of shows how it is approaching a problem. It shows how it is thinking about the problems. And I think that is something that will really help with the transparency aspect of it. Otherwise, if you just ask a question and if you just get the answer, there's no way to know how that answer came about, what data sources were queried or used. So I think transparency, data security, privacy, I think there's some ethical frameworks slash guidelines also that companies would have to implement, right? And I think just overall, I think enterprises don't necessarily want to block these vendors, or they don't want to necessarily block their employees from using ChatGPT or whatever, but they also want to do it in a safe and secure way. So I think that is probably the biggest challenge that companies are facing these days.
Got it. So, Anshuman, if you see, right, security has been and AI has been there for long also, at least, and security also has been there for long. So,
Mhm.
do you think there are, because there are already existing security solutions and there are a lot of security companies in the industry, the existing security solutions are sufficient for the risks that are coming with the Gen AI adoption, or there is a need of new things or what?
Yeah, no, I don't think existing solutions necessarily are going to help us address these AI needs as well. And I say that because some of these AI technologies, right, like for example, retrieval augmented generation or RAG architectures, right, that's at least for me as a security practitioner, even if AI or machine learning has been around for years, the RAG concept has just came about recently, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it, right? So, I mean, the fact that you can create a knowledge base of sorts, right, based on your internal documentation or whatever it is, and then the fact that you can allow anybody to query that knowledge base, right? There are issues like authorization, access control issues, right? How do you ensure that user A is only allowed to query the data set that belongs to user A, and there's no cross uh, pollination of data from one user to the other user. So I think these kind of problems, right, like especially access control and authorization problems, are very specific to some of these architectures that get implemented using AI technologies. And I know there are some startups starting this space of how to secure their RAG architectures and whatnot. So, yeah, I think there are very specific needs, specific problems, and I think there has to be specific solutions for those problems. And I believe existing security vendors and solutions aren't enough, and they'll probably have to, sort of consider the other areas as well.
Got it. So I think you already covered my next question. What I was going to ask you that what are the key problems that you see in integrating with the threats that are coming, right? Gen AI threat with
Mhm.
the current cybersecurity framework. So and you already talked about ethical use. So keep thinking on those lines, right? So what as a 16 staff security engineer at Lyft, what you how you ensure that it should be like a ethical use of Gen AI, like privacy, biasness, and other things, right?
Yeah, I think it all starts with um, our security team working with the compliance and the legal teams, right? And we try to come up with some of the policies and best practices that we want to share with all the engineering teams, and we want to hold them accountable for that, right? So, in other words, to give a concrete example, right? Like if we don't want PII or personal identifiable information to leave our company's infrastructure and go to, like, let's say OpenAI, whatever, then we have to come up with certain policies around that. And then how do we enforce those policies, right? How do we ensure that we are doing a due diligence in scanning all the outgoing traffic for PII, right? So it becomes really important to think about how exactly we're going to enforce these security controls. So again, there are solutions, right? Like there are tools like LLM Guard and whatnot, where you can basically scan all the prompts. You can scan all the outbound traffic to see if any PI is being sent out or not. So yeah, I think it starts with working with your compliance teams in order to figure out the risk that the company is willing to take, right? And then based on that, coming up with a set of requirements, right, which will eventually inform the policies that you want to implement in your company, right? And then after that, once you have all of that, what will be important is how do you enforce those policies? How do you make sure that you're not blocking teams, but you're enabling them in a safe and secure way, and you also complying to these policies and whatnot. So I think, yeah, it's like a holistic program. I almost consider that, like how their product security teams and their security operation teams, I almost feel like we're getting close to a stage where there'll be a need for like AI security teams in enterprises, right? Where the focus would be, okay, how do we secure these AI initiatives?
I think this is a very good point, and I have never heard about this. And I think and you touched it correctly. So it looks like, yeah, definitely there might be a need of a AI security teams because the adoption has increased so much, and there are so many doors open. So you don't know from where things can fall. So I think, yeah, this can be like the next big thing, which can also come like you. Okay, you will have a AI security teams just focusing on the AI adoption and where it is falling or what is happening. So
Yeah,
what? Yeah.
I just wanted to add one more thing. So I think there's also this concept of, I basically see the AI revolution happening in two phases, right? Well, not phases, but two worlds, right? One is, can security teams use AI to scale themselves, or how can security teams use AI to sort of solve some of their problems, right? So that's one world. The other world is, how do we secure these AI initiatives, right? So I'm already starting to see companies that are coming up with this AI security engineer sort of a role, right? Where you they're basically going to enhance your team or complement your team by providing a service, and this service would basically be like an AI security engineer, right? So yeah, I think it's important to consider both aspects. Is there's going to be a need for for specialized teams who understand the security implications of AI initiatives, but then there will also be these technologies and vendors that will sort of propose an AI security engineer. So I think I'm a little bit more skeptic about the other approach because there are so many nuances to it, right? Like how do you, I mean, uh, I think generative AI is a piece of technology where there has to be a human in the loop for sure, right? Like you can't just blindly trust it, right? And it is all about the prompts. The the outcome of your technology will really depend on how good your prompt is, right? So yeah, I think it's more nuanced, right? As compared to just kind of you go and purchase a software from a vendor and then all your problems will go away. I don't think it's going to work like that. So I think it's important to call that out.
Sure, totally. So, what strategy do you recommend for organizations to stay ahead of the adversarial AI attacks?
I think you know collaborating across the industry,
Hmm.
when it comes to these standards and tools and frameworks. I think since this is still very much upcoming technology, I think the risks that enterprises face around this technology is still not clear. I mean, it is clear, but I think folks are still trying to understand how it applies to different verticals, right? Like healthcare industry might have different risks, financial industry might have different risks, right? So coming up with an agreed upon framework, right, like that uh, different companies across different verticals can sort of implement. I think that will be key. Um, I think understanding the misuse and the ethical guidelines would also be huge because, again, like, the problems of hallucination and the problems of not able to reliably trust the outcome, right? I think these are very fundamental problems, right? Like, how can you use a technology in solving problems when you can't trust the outcome in the first place? So, I think there's a lot of promise here. There's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of innovation that can happen using these technologies, but there has to be certain guardrails around it. There has to be certain ways to consistently verify that the outcomes are what you expect. So these are, I believe, if the industry at large can sort of agree upon, okay, how do we approach these things? I think there's so much we can do with it. Yeah.
Sure. And as a individual and as a like a staff security engineer at Lyft, so what are the advancement in Gen AI that you are like most excited about? Oh wow, this is gonna solve my 90%
Mhm.
of problems or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Or and
Mhm.
what you and using them, then you say, oh wow, it can solve my 90% of problems, and then you say, oh, should I use it because there is some security aspect or security thing that you are concerned about? So
Mhm.
where do you see things? What are those things which are you are really excited, and what security things that you think are keeping you cautious to use them or do
Yeah,
enhancements on?
yeah, absolutely. And I can speak from my personal experiences of working at Lyft. So at Lyft, I've been experimenting with Gen AI for some time now, and seeing again how we can use it ourselves to scale ourselves, and how do we like secure these technologies, right? So I think, right, uh, the RAG architecture, or the RAG concept of, you create a knowledge base based on your internal documentation, and then you use that to sort of get some insights or do security reviews, so to speak. I think there's a lot of potential here, especially in the AppSec world, right? Like, application security has historically been a domain within the security space where it's mostly manual activities, like doing threat modeling, doing security review. It's what an AppSec engineer would spend hours doing, right? Manually. There is automation, but AppSec especially is a domain in the security field where it's mostly manual expertise, right? So I think if we use something like the RAG architecture, where we can build an internal assistant of like some sorts with all our best practices and our policies and whatnot, right? And if we use that knowledge base as a means of like a security oracle to perform security reviews or things like that, I think the manual aspect of a security of an application security engineer could be slightly improved. I'm not going to say it'll completely go away, but at least it'll help with the coverage and the visibility, right? Because uh, security teams are really small, right? Like they operate on a scale of, I'm going to say like 1 to 100, right? A ratio of security engineer and engineers. So it's really important to scale in a way that we have better coverage, right? Like coverage has been a problem in every company I've worked at. When things get shipped, right? And if you don't have the visibility, right? How do we increase that visibility? So I think for those kind of problems, I think using something like the RAGs, and like just kind of are trying to automate as much as AppSec teams can. I think there's a lot of value there. So that is one positive aspect I see about it. On the same hand, right, I think what I've at least seen in my experience is the outcomes are not consistent, right? So if I ask this system to do a security review on the same document 2 times, 3 times, every time the output is different, right? So I think consistency is probably going to be the biggest blocker of some of these newer approaches to be adopted by teams. I think there are ways around it, right? Like you can sort of provide examples, you can enhance your prompts to just kind of ask exactly what you need. So there are ways around it, but it's not easy, right? Like you have to know what you're doing. Yeah.
Totally, totally. And so, Ajay, and you are already in that position, so I think you would be the best person to address this. So, Ajay, staff security engineer at Lyft, or at some CISO sitting at their organizations, right, who had the ownership or who had the leadership, they have to take care of the security of their whole company. So, what they need, you think that they should be equipped with so that they can fight these new threats that are coming up with the Gen AI adoption? So what
Mm-hmm.
type of things they need to plan so that they should
Mm-hmm.
be able to fight with the big, as you said, right? There are 100 engineers and one security engineers or whatever, thousand, whatever. So what they should have a more
Mm-hmm.
automated and or a set of things they need to do, so they are not going away from the super productivity that Gen AI adoption is bringing, but at the same time they are not putting their security on stake. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
where do you see? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a good question. It's a very relevant question in today's world. I think there are few aspects to this, right? I think understanding how an organization considers their risk, right? So I think that is probably going to be the first key step is how how do you, as like the CISO of an organization, perceive the risk that applies to your organization, right? Now, this could be significantly different based on the industry your company might be in. Like healthcare industries have completely different risk versus the financial industry, right? So, I think having a good understanding of what are the attack vectors, what are the threats, all of that stuff. How do you calculate risk? So that will be very useful. I think after that, data classification is probably going to be the next key step, right? Because as we spoke about, right, like data security, data privacy is the number one risk when it comes to AI technologies. So if I think it is paramount for any organization or for any CISO to understand the data classification of the organization and how data really flows, right, across different systems, what kind of data flows, what are the key systems where the customer information resides, how is data being encrypted and stored, and like all that kind of stuff, right? So I think the more insights about these things a CISO has, right, I think it will allow the CISO to make informed decisions, right? So let's say uh, there are certain systems that don't process anything sensitive, right? So you don't have to worry about securing the AI technologies on those systems, right? So I think yeah, data classification, understanding the risk, and then just kind of basically focusing on the observability aspect of things, right? Like because at the end of the day, if you're going to implement AI technology in your organization, and if you're not kind of spinning up your own models or whatnot, you're probably going to be interacting with these third-party vendors like OpenAI or Anthropic, right? And what that would mean is that there would be traffic going outbound to those vendors, right? So do you have the right observability in place to see what are the prompts being sent, what is the data being sent out, right? And there are certain security controls that you can enable to make sure that you can block any PII being sent out and whatnot. So yeah, I think visibility, observability, understanding of risk, data classification are some things that a CISO might want to have a better understanding of before making any decisions.
Sure. So, pretty nicely put up, Anshuman. Thank you for that. So, the last question, as you covered all the things like what from the other side of the story, what people need to be ready with, what all as a CISO or the staff security engineer there. But for the customers or for the vendors which are building up, right? Like company like Swift
Mhm.
Security, which is building a base solution for safely enabling GenAI adoption. So for company like us, so what advice would you give that where should be the focus on? Because whenever startups come, they come up with a smaller budget and smaller focus area rather than building
Mhm.
everything, right? So where do you see that the company startups like us, Swift Security, should be focusing on as your advice?
Yeah, yeah. So um, I guess this is probably an area that I'm least experienced in. So my advice here, I don't know, like I would say advice, but just kind of I would share my experiences here. I've seen, companies getting started up by just sort of adding an additional layer on top of the ChatGPT API or something, right? Where it's anybody can do that, right? Like you basically providing a service to an end user by using the OpenAI API behind the scenes. I think that's fine. That's easy to do that. But I think in the broader sense of things, right? I think what will really make a big difference is uh, the ability to explain and be transparent about what exactly you're doing, how you're doing it, what is the technology behind the scenes, right? The more you try to obscure your technology, I think the more difficult it's going to get, right? Because you will get asked those questions from your customers and whatnot. So yeah, just kind of I really believe in building out an open, right, and just kind of being transparent, making your documentation online like available and things like that. Um, m- uh, Making your security practices out, right? Like how do you secure infrastructure? How do you secure code, right? So I think all of those things will basically keep companies accountable and responsible, right? And I think that will allow the trust to build in the customers, right? Because the number one thing that allows company to grow and get on more customers is the trust factor. If I don't trust a company like Amazon, I'm not going to use a product, right? So how does a company like Amazon build trust with somebody like me? So I'm confident in the security practice and whatnot. So I think focusing on the trust aspect of it, by being more transparent, right? By kind of building out an open, by sharing blogs about how you're solving engineering problems and things like that. I think that would be my recommendation because that is something I look forward to when I'm trying to choose between vendors.
Cool. Cool. Thanks, Anshuman. Thanks for your time today and giving us your insightful thoughts. Really helpful. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Naveen.